Hi, I wanted to share the kind of therapy we practice at our nonprofit and in my own private practice. Here are actual extracts from online therapy sessions. To preserve client confidentiality and with client consent, I only record my own camera feed and share parts that do not convey identifying information. As a result, you will not see the context, but you will, however, gain an idea for the themes of our therapy, which are connecting to self in awareness and kindness, which leads to genuine power and compassion. Okay, just a Monday morning, not enough sleep. How about you? What you're saying makes a lot of sense, and we have two modules. I don't know if I've spoken about that or not before, but we have a rational analysis module, and what you're saying makes a lot of sense from the from our rational module. But we also happen to have an emotional module too. Yeah, kind of your executive brain was on and working at that time, so not much emotions during that time. I resonate with you, and at the same time, there's some situations in which that don't serve us well, paradoxically. So in terms of quote unquote work related things, plowing through difficult situations, putting emotions aside is a fantastic quality. In terms of human relationships, this is where things are actually the opposite. It's a disservice because that means we're good at negating our emotions or putting them aside, which means we are good at putting our loved ones' emotions aside, which means they can feel not understood or lonely. Does that fit? In other words, what serves you really well at work is the opposite of what may serve you in human non-work relationships. Yeah, and I'd invite you to consider tweaking your concept of rationality. So here's the proposal, and tell me what your thoughts are. Research is super strongly indicating that us humans, are wired to want to connect. There's tons of research of that, including the fact that solitary confinement is considered a form of torture. And from a rational perspective, that makes a lot of sense if we view that as a mechanism so that we don't feel alone, so that we have greater chance of survival as a species. And so there's also that, that in terms of how we're wired, if we consider how we're wired, there's a bunch of things that we can add to rationality, such as feeling crummy when we're broken up with, because that sends alarm systems to our wiring of danger, I'm going to be alone, including in the same light being negatively impacted when we're fired, of course, even though there's an economic component, but when we're judged, danger. So there's a whole bunch of things that if we take into account, the how we seem to be wired, that then become, for me, a part of the rationality calculation. If we view ourselves as machines that can do anything they want, then these things are not rational. But if we view ourselves as a machine that have some pre-programming and some pre-wiring, then these things become rational. Am I making sense? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Yeah. And so, in intimate relationships, it becomes very important to also integrate that part of our makeup too. Not the quote unquote, rational from a, classical utilitarian perspective. What you may seem to be doing with your colleague in terms of, am I left alone? Am I left behind? All these things, given how we're wired, seem to actually make a lot of sense, even though they're quote unquote not rational. So in terms of the narrow rationality point of view, they're not, but in terms of an enhanced rationality that includes, the makeup that we seem to have, then they do make sense. And having some discernment as to, when do we put our emotions aside and when do we not. And similarly, having some discernment, which is, when do we put our partners, our loved one emotions aside, or when do we let it affect us or not? I don't know if I'm making sense with the later one. But usually, when we're used to coming from a very strong executive perspective, I don't know, tell me if that fits. Default position is to, plow through, push emotions aside, plow through. Wonderful quality in some environments, but it comes with some negative side effects in others. So I don't know if this is something that what your thoughts are on this, but it seems like the work of therapy, at least relationally, is to figure out what to do with our emotions, get more comfortable with them, and process them, so that we can then process, the emotion, help process the emotions of the people who are dear to us.